Muito bem-vindo a mais um MC 101. Olha, e que baita MC 101 que a gente tem pra hoje, hein, gente? Que coisa maluca que vai ser hoje. Vocês têm que me dar licença, porque agora eu vou mandar uma mensagem pra quem tá assistindo em inglês. Só um segundo. Hey guys! Yes, today I have a special guest here, but as you notice, I start in Portuguese, and I will do the rest of the introduction in Portuguese. When we start the interview with Austin, then it's gonna be in English. So be patient, I will come back to English very soon, ok? Então, galera, agora que eu já dei o recado pra galera que tá assistindo em inglês, que pode estar por aí, para falar com vocês que quem tá assistindo aí no roxinho tá funcionando no Twitch, tá funcionando aqui no YouTubas, tá funcionando no Passarinho, no Cara de Livro, tá funcionando até no Trovo. Pra quem não conhece o Trovo, depois vai lá e conhece, que é um backup caso as coisas não funcionem como deveriam. Tá? Me diz aí embaixo se o áudio tá legal, se o vídeo tá legal. Vocês já sabem como funciona o MC 101. Para quem não conhece o MC 101, é o quadro aqui no meu canal, onde eu entrevisto criadores de conteúdo. Não importa se eles são youtubers, se estão no Instagram, no Facebook, se o cara trabalha em jornal, TV, se ele cria conteúdo, mais cedo ou mais tarde você vai ver ele aqui. E o mais interessante, hoje é o primeiro que eu vou fazer em inglês. Não é o primeiro internacional. Eu já trouxe o Nuno Agonia aqui. Português, Portugal, internacional. Mas esse é o primeiro que eu faço em inglês. Então eu peço a vocês também muita paciência. Quem tiver aí no YouTube ou no Twitch e puder ir traduzindo pra galera, só uma pessoa, não várias, alguém que tiver inglês legal e tiver afim, puder ir traduzindo pras pessoas aí o que a gente tá conversando pro português legal. Isso ajuda bastante quem tá acompanhando, porque a entrevista vai ser conduzida toda em inglês. Posteriormente, depois, ela vai estar disponível em inglês com legendas, subtitles, legendas, tá bom? Então tenham isso em mente. Pode demorar 1, 2 dias, mas vai estar disponível com legenda. Agora é hora de você dar aquele like, não mendigue seu like. Agora é aquela hora de você compartilhar com todo mundo, fazer acontecer, tá bom? Porque agora eu vou passar para o inglês. Okay? Okay, then. So today, on MC 101, the first English interview ever on this channel. So this will be an inauguration day for the English speakers on this channel and also for the English audience. And this will be, this entrance I just did here, this intro I just did here in Portuguese will be also subtitled for English later after this live stream. So have this in mind. We're doing live streaming, and live streaming, pretty much things can go wrong, so have this in mind. For those who don't know, this is the MC 101. This is the show in my channel where I interview content creators, no matter if they are from YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, no matter if they are working in a newspaper, on a TV, broadcasting company, doesn't matter. If they are content creators, sooner or later you're gonna see them here. And today, I have someone here that I was glad, not the honor, but glad to know in person. I guess 2 years or more ago, we have the chance to meet for the first time, and it was an awesome time. And to be honest, I was watching his content, but I didn't imagine how short he is in size. And also, he's laughing now, I can see. But also how big he is on heart. That's the other side that you figure out when you have this personal content with people. So Mr. Austin Evans, that's the right pronunciation, a little bit hard for me for a Brazilian guy that speaks Portuguese. It's here. Austin, are you there, my brother?
I am, and thanks for calling me out as short. I really appreciate it.
That's a compliment. Could be worse, right?
You know, it's funny. Just the other day, I was walking to a GameStop, and I was like checking out, and the guy's like, "I know you from YouTube, right?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "I thought you were a lot taller, man." I was like, "Thanks, thanks. I love it. I love it." Yes, I'm Linus height. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, it's like the camera angle, you know.
Yeah, exactly. The camera here is very low to make me seem taller, but obviously that's not the case.
If you know him in person, you may confuse him as a kid, especially in a GameStop store.
Oh!
I know that hurts. I'm sorry for that. Okay, Austin.
Thanks for having me on, man.
Way before you start doing your channel on YouTube, way before you start creating content, who were Austin Evans? Sorry. Who are you, man? What you are doing was a kid? What were your dreams? How everything started?
So I have always loved tech, right? As a kid, though, I think as most kids, I had a lot of kind of ideas for things I wanted to do, right? I mean, cars have always been a passion. And specifically for a long time, I was really into writing, right? For all of my teenage years, I was like, I'm going to be a writer. I wrote every day. Like that was really what was my passion. But as the years went on and as I got toward, 16, 17 or so, I started to kind of realize that this thing called video was something that I actually enjoyed not only consuming, but I started thinking more and more about like, I should actually create the content, right? And so that was kind of what drew me in that path. But I'm telling you, man, for a very long time, I would just write all day long, right? I mean, I remember my dad used to yell at me. He's like, go outside, go play. And I'd just be sitting there with my notebooks, like sitting up by a tree, just like writing out stories and stuff. It was something I really enjoyed.
How old are you at that time?
That time, probably 12, maybe 13. But yeah, like I started writing my first book when I was like 10, right? It was just something that I would just...
10 years old writing a book?
Well, I mean, book in quotes. It's one of those things where I would finish my schoolwork early and the teacher would go, okay, cool, go do whatever you want. I go into the corner, pull out my notebook and start writing, right? It was just something that I was a nerd and I really enjoyed that process. And I will say a lot of that sort of stuff that I did as a kid, as sort of learning how to write then, has been really helpful for me today, right? I mean, obviously not all the videos are scripted or anything like that, although some have been in the past. But it was a helpful way to sort of think about creating content, whether it be written or video, but thinking about it from an early age of not just consuming things, not just enjoying things, but actually thinking about the way to create. That was always something that grabbed me early and it sort of held through my whole life so far.
Is that something that came out of your mind only, or do you remember any kind of influence at that time?
Oh, it was totally books like Harry Potter, right? I mean, especially when I was, like 9, 10, 11, that was when Harry Potter was huge, right? So I'd be there, and I remember I think it was like the 6th book when it came out. I read the whole 700 pages in one day, right? 8 a.m. to like 11 p.m. that night. I was just reading it like crazy. It was one of those things that was one of the first things that really grabbed me, right? It was just something that I enjoyed reading these things, and it seemed so easy, right? Just, you dream up these characters, you tell stories. I always like to kind of tell stories, but the idea that you could write them and refine them and kind of make them exactly the way you wanted, it really appealed to me in a way that other things that I was kind of vaguely interested in didn't. I liked tech at the time. I liked Game Boys and all these things, but there was no clear path to make that a career short of working at like an electronics store or something, right? It wasn't something that seemed like it had a lot of potential. But the writing thing, I was a 10-year-old. I didn't need to wait to get a job or anything like that. I could just start doing it. And it was something that I would like share the stories with my friends and later sharing online. And it was one of those things that immediately gave me all this gratification. Like, oh, I can create something. And other people, obviously I look back, they were all terrible. But like other people would be like, oh, that's pretty good. Or oh, I enjoyed reading that or whatever.
Your friends, for sure. They want to be nice to you, right? Your family.
Exactly.
And that somehow promotes you inside, from the inside, to keep doing it, right?
Absolutely, yeah. Because it was like one of those things where, I mean, I was a nerd as a kid. It's not like I had this, amazing social life and I'm out there like cause problems. Like, I'm just a nerd sitting at home. I'm either playing video games or writing stories and stuff. So it wasn't like I was missing out on all kinds of craziness, although I guess I was, but it wasn't like I had a lot of opportunity to go and get into trouble. So it was one of those things
when video came on your life, when exactly, do you remember a point in your life that you say, whoa, that's when things start to really change on video, going to the final format, right?
Yeah, so I first really started thinking about video. There were times like I would, again, in those early days, right, like 11, 12 years old, we had some games on the family computer that I was able to go in and on the actual disc, like pull out, they were like the full motion videos. And so my brother and I would love going in and grabbing those videos and pulling them out of games like Sudden Strike and some of these like really, really older titles, but they had, the 320 by 240 like WMV videos you could pull out, and we would drag them into Windows Movie Maker, chop them up. And I remember being so proud, showing my parents, like, look what we made. And they're like, you made that? I'm like, yeah, I basically made it. I didn't like, I just dropped 3 cuts and put 3 of these together, but I made something. those were the really early days, but it didn't really get kicked off until I started getting on YouTube, and it was probably have been 2007 was when I was first kind of learning about YouTube and actually starting watching content creators there regularly. And that's when the wheels started turning.
I can tell you, Windows Movie Maker was the start for a lot of people, though. A lot of people. And one thing good about Windows Movie Maker, besides Windows itself, hardly it crashes.
It was like, look, obviously at that time, all I would do was just take things, cut, slice, like there was nothing special at all. Maybe add some music. But it's one of those things where I think about it now, right? And I think about the amount of tools that kids who are, in my position, 10, 11, 12, or even older, whatever, are in today, where you have so many different tools available. Like back in the day, I didn't own a camera, right? I didn't have a digital camera. I didn't have a webcam. I didn't have anything to actually like digitally record anything. So I was purely cutting stuff that I could gather, whether it was later on, like downloading clips on the internet or whatever the case was. But I didn't have the ability to actually create content for myself until actually after I had already started making YouTube videos, because my first YouTube videos, they were just screenshots. So it was one of those things where if you're a kid coming up today and you have a smartphone, you have the edit suite there, might not be amazing, but you can certainly do editing on that. You have a camera which is existing, unlike what I had when I was a kid. There's a lot of things that you can do. And obviously the world of content creation, I'm sure we'll talk about it more later, but like it's so much more evolved now, right? No one knew what they were doing. There was no such thing as a full-time YouTuber in 2006, 2007, right? So no one had anything figured out. And so it was a fun time, but it was a very different kind of place than the world is here 14, 15 years later. Ugh, that makes me feel old.
I know. Wait until you see white hair coming from places you couldn't imagine. So, one thing that is really, really interesting about what you are telling me so far about your life, your early life, there is a huge desire on compose, on create, on write. So create text, create, narratives, create somehow some kind of storytelling process. Then you move a little bit further. You start to get interesting about clipping videos and edit them, but not yours, not you on the camera. Like you mentioned, having a camera, webcam, there's no webcam at that time though.
Yeah.
Right? And having a camera on computer, you come on, that's impossible, right? You have like the VHS, something like that.
Yeah.
So moving forward, you can see like you have probably the most important base, which is the storytelling process happening very early in your life. Then later, you adding some tool, and this tool, probably video, kind of fit on a way to be a tool to do better storytelling. Maybe you didn't figure out right away that should be the destiny waiting for you, but at that time, one thing really matches the other to make you a YouTuber in the future. Have you ever thought about that in this very poetic sense?
I can't say I've ever thought about it quite like that. I mean, there were certainly some parallels at the beginning, right? And some of my very early videos, which have been deleted off the internet for a decade or so, well before I actually started creating the tech stuff, I would basically read some of the stories I would write, right? So essentially it was just like the audio, and I would actually have the text of the story I was reading come up on screen, right? So those were the very first videos that I posted to YouTube. Again, back in that 2000, that probably would have been 2008 or so.
You start with that. You're reading your stories on YouTube.
Yep, exactly. Yep,
and
but no camera.
You definitely erased those videos, right?
Oh, they are long gone, my friends.
I can imagine.
that server has been tossed to the bottom of the landfill like 5 years ago. It is history.
Oh, that should be, like, man, that's a fountain of memes, so like I can imagine how that would replicate on the internet very fast.
Nope. It's been scrubbed for a long time. But yeah, that was kind of the beginning, right? I mean, it was sort of like you could kind of see the evolution of the stories into kind of dipping my toe into video. And then once sort of 2009 came around, I got really into it, right? I mean, I pretty much went from posting my first tech video to posting almost daily for a full year. I think I posted something like...
Where comes the idea from tech? That's a good point. Now we are getting into the content creation area. Where in your mind, what was the snap that came to you and said, I should do tech videos?
So it was actually all because of my first iPod Touch.
Really?
So it was absolutely that. Yeah. So basically, the Christmas beforehand, I was getting an iPod Touch, and I was like, knew it ahead of time, and I was getting very excited. And I spent like months like going on to iTunes and downloading apps on locally to my computer. So as soon as I got the iPod, I could sync them over. I was very excited. And as part of that, I started watching a lot of tech videos, right? Stuff like case reviews and stuff like app reviews, all that kind of stuff. And so when I got that iPod Touch, hey, I'm going to make some videos myself. I started reviewing apps. I started doing like rumor videos about like, oh, the next iPhone and all these kind of things. But that's absolutely where it got started, right? That was the content that I was watching. And especially because it was such a nascent space, no one was really making, or very few people were making sort of tech content there. No one really had it that well figured out. It was one of those things where I'm like, oh, I could give that a try. And to my very, very great fortune, it actually ended up working out pretty well because there was so little competition that any video I would make would get viewed by other people like me who are, going out and buying that first iPod or the iPhone or whatever the case was. I was able to start kind of rising up in the search. And even though YouTube was a lot smaller than it was today, it was much, much smaller on the content creator side. So it was very much balanced, right? Like today there's, I don't know, 1 million videos uploaded every 5 minutes or whatever that number is. But back in the day, YouTube was starting to get popular, but people creating content was not that popular yet.
And not even close to some kind of professional understanding. Everything was made to be amateur. So YouTube was a place to store your personal videos somehow and share with your family. That was the first understandings of YouTube that appeared, and people started using that direction. And I don't remember that time frame you were mentioned, anyone trying to do something really professional on that. Actually, there is a big fight from the TV broadcasts, from the content companies, huge content company creator companies, trying to avoid content to appear on that, to be on YouTube or on the internet. Remember, we just leave behind Napster.
Yep. And a lot of what people use YouTube for back in the day was watching like TV shows and whatnot, right? Because at the time there was no like content ID or anything. I mean, you could upload whatever you wanted, and I think there's a whole lawsuit about it like years and years ago. But apparently YouTube was kind of like, whatever, people are using the site, we'll deal with it later. So yeah, at the time it was cat videos and like episodes of SpongeBob or whatever, right? So it was a different space. There were a couple of people by 2009 who were doing it more professionally, right? There were people like, John for Lakers, Soldier Knows Best, iJustine, Chris Pirillo. There were a few people who were starting to get things rolling, but it certainly was nothing, like completely unrecognizable to the YouTube that we all use today.
Definitely. At that time, when you start talking about tech, like you mentioned, it's funny because you mentioned at that time, there's few competition, right? We have a say in Brazil, in Portuguese, we say, I'm going to say in Portuguese, then I'm going to try to translate the meaning in English, okay? We say, quando eu cheguei aqui era só mato. So in English, it should be something like, when I arrived here, everything was high growth grass. So there's only grass.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So nothing was there. There's no buildings. There's no houses. There is no roads. There's just grass. So you feel the same way, right? When you start, it was pretty much like that.
Oh yeah, I was incredibly fortunate because at the time, I mean, especially those first 6 months or so, or I don't know, 3-4 months or so, the first videos that I made, I didn't have a camera, right? So all the videos I made, it was screenshots either of apps or of, photos from Engadget or whatever the case was, talking about product and whatnot. And I would use the microphone from, you remember the game Rock Band?
I do. No, are you kidding me? You use the Rock Band microphone to record your first videos. Oh, shit.
It was for the Rock Band for PS2 mic. And it was a regular USB mic. I didn't even realize it, but I plugged it into my PC one day. It just showed up like anything else. It was terrible, right? But yeah, that was it. That was literally my entire setup. I had a $400 laptop. I had a microphone and screenshots in Windows Movie Maker, right? And that's how I made videos for, like I said, like, I don't know exactly how many videos I made before I got my first camera, which was still pretty terrible, but I was probably 40 or 50 videos like that. Like there was a lot of things that I was making because I was having fun and the videos started getting views, right? I mean, it wasn't anything crazy, but I would make videos that would get like 100 views, 400 views, 800 views, which for me, I was like, this is great.
Crazy, crazy, right?
Living the
Living the dream.
Dude, absolutely, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there was no notion of making money, right? It was not like, oh, this is my job or anything. This was like, hey, I'm the 16-year-old kid and I'm popular on the internet. Look at me, what's up, you know?
It's pretty much like that, right? In the beginning, it was pretty much like that with everything we do. Do you remember, if you have like a forum at that time, you were a king.
Oh, yeah.
If you have a forum, you are a king. You have like 1,000 users on a forum, you are a king, man.
Absolutely. You're a mod. You're in the special VIP zone. It was a different kind of space. And it's like, look, I feel like we're like old dudes being like, back in the old days. But it was so different. And I just don't think if you're coming up these days and you didn't experience that, it's hard to kind of explain it because it feels so different in the way that, I mean, every kid who is 7, 8 years old knows that being a YouTuber is a job, right? That was a completely foreign concept back in 2008, 2009, even 2010. It was so different, right? And I think the way that we all thought about content back then is so different than people think about it nowadays, where there's these very clear paths. You know, you start your TikTok, you move over to YouTube, and you start Twitch streaming or whatever. Like, there's a clear progression, and all these sort of things mean that you can have massive success and views and money and all these things. But it just wasn't like that. People made content for vanity or for showing off to their friends or whatever the case was. That was really why you did it. And if it turned out to be something later, cool. But there was no clear way to be able to be successful back in those early days. You just made content because you wanted to.
There's no clear path. Nobody ever walked that path. That was something that the first ones like you, when you start doing that, they're doing just because they enjoy. That's it.
Absolutely.
That's it.
Yeah. Which is good, right? Because I think it was something that was incredibly fun for me, right? Like, I will say, as soon as I started taking YouTube seriously, I basically stopped writing entirely, right?
When
like
was
all
that?
of my creative energy.
That's a good point. In which moment you realize, hey, look, this is really serious. I mean, if I invest time here, maybe this can be a good chunk of my life.
It happened pretty organically, right? I mean, before I started making content, right, I was writing and that was just what I did. And that had what I've been doing at that point for, the majority of my life almost. And then as I started creating the tech stuff, it really dropped off quickly because I realized like, oh, I'm writing all these things and I might share it here or there, but it's nowhere near the idea of I can create a video and 30 minutes later, I might get 4 comments or 5 comments and people are actually watching the stuff, right? It was different. And I think that sort of worked in my brain in a way that the writing just simply didn't, that instant kind of gratification. And also it was, I mean, looking back now, 50 views or 100 views isn't all that impressive. But for me back then, I was like, oh, wait, this is like a real thing because a lot of YouTube videos had like no views or 1 or 2, right? So 50, 100, so I started getting videos a little while later that we get like 1,000 or more views. I was like, this is a really big deal. So yeah, it was just one of those things where it completely snapped, but it wasn't until a little later after I'd started creating content that the idea of making money or turning it into a job came up. It was at least, I would say probably 6 months or so until I was really aware of the YouTube partner program. And it was I was probably been making content regularly for a full year before I actually finally got accepted into that partner program in probably like middle of 2010, it would have been.
So about 4 years after you start.
Well, I started using YouTube in 2007 and uploading some content in 2008, but it wasn't until like early 2009 that I actually started the tech stuff that's still up on the channel today. So I would say it was about there's some experimenting before, but I would say like actually taking it seriously and uploading, every day, every other day, it was about a year or so before I hit that point.
But when you start uploading every day, is that at that moment in time was set in your mind, this is something I will invest more of my time, or are you still doing only for joy? I don't know, because at certain point you should think, okay, I will invest more on that.
I was a 16-year-old who didn't exactly have anything else to do, so I don't think
at 16 years old, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah.
No idea. Actually, I'm trying to figure out how to buy beer.
I wasn't that cool. I was making internet videos in my bedroom. Yeah, it was one of those things where, like, I think it kind of slowly dawned on me because at the time I knew some people who were making money, but it wasn't from YouTube. They were making money from like a website, right? They had like a tech blog or something like that. So like, I knew that there was money there, and I knew that it was possible. And again, in those early, you know, the 6 months or so after I started creating the channel, the YouTube Partner Program started. More and more people started getting ads. It started out to be a thing. I didn't really think like, oh, this is going to be a huge deal until later when I actually joined the Partner Program and I got that first AdSense check. I'm like, yeah, I did it, Mom. I did it.
The first check, how much was the first check? $100? Well, like
no,
the
it was actually, my first check was, sorry. My first check was $150, but my first full month check, because it got turned on, my first full month check was like $600, which for me, I was like 700, I was like 17 at that point. I was like, I'm rich. I'm buying a laptop, buy a camera.
Yeah, from that moment on, you start to do some math, right? Every month I can buy a new laptop.
Exactly, right? Because at the time, so I didn't actually have a job at the time, right? I was like, it's kind of getting to the point where I was supposed to kind of get a job, and I just kind of kept putting it off. And then when I finally got partner, I applied to be a partner 4 times before I actually got approved, right? So it was one of those things where I actually got it, and a couple months later, my first check showed up and everything, and it was like the second that like I got approved and actually started making like money from it, everything else dropped away. But it was scary for a while, right? Because even though at that point my channel was doing relatively well, right? I would be getting, at that time I was probably getting like thousands of views for pretty much every video. I think I had like maybe 1,000. No, actually, I think it was probably a little close to 2,000 subscribers at the end of the first year. I was like, actually, like, clearly things were working, but also it was such the Wild West at the time, because so many of my friends would just randomly get their like accounts deleted, or it was really bad. There was like clickjacking, or what was it called? I forget. It was like basically if someone clicked on your ads like 5 or 6 times, you could just lose your AdSense. At the end, your YouTube is just toast, right? So it was really scary because I didn't have a backup plan. Like as soon as I got that partner, I was in. I was like, this is it. I'm a YouTuber now. And there was a long time before I actually felt comfortable with that decision.
Because there is a huge learning curve on YouTube. And that's something you only can realize when you start using it and doing it. And along the time, because you start very early on that tool, on that platform, along the time the tool evolved so fast and changed so much the rules and the way they face not only the copyright stuff, but also how they create the algorithm, how that works, how they pay back to YouTubers. That changes a lot along the time. And if you are not there from the beginning, it's quite hard to keep up on the speed they are changing, They may change faster than you can learn.
Yeah, and I will say, just looking back now on the whole journey, the tech space, I'm incredibly happy as where I landed, because so many other places were massively impacted. You just talk about like algorithm stuff, right? Like I was probably 4 or 5 years before I even considered the fact that there's some algorithm at play. Like you just make videos, how many subscribers you got roughly that many views, give or take some. The video did well on like search, for example, it might go higher. That was it. It was very simple in those early days. But then things like reply girls happened, where you could do like the video responses, and they started cracking down on that. And then they started shifting to like more of like the click through and the watch time. I remember there was a point at which like it was like overnight, all of the family channels just like lost all their views, and they like started moving things around. But thankfully, looking back, the tech space has never really been impacted by any of these things. Like obviously it's always like sort of pushing here, pulling there, you get like a wave, and then all of a sudden it kind of comes down, and there's always fluctuations, but there was never some like, oh my God, it's all over kind of moment, which looking back, I'm very thankful, because a lot of other YouTubers, a lot of other content creators had those kind of moments and either had to quit or had to get a job, or things obviously went really wrong. So I'm very thankful of that.
There is I cannot skip that, because I watched the video at that time and I feel really sad for you. I think many other YouTubers also helped you at that time when your house got on fire.
Yeah.
How was that episode? How that happened? What did you feel at the time? What happens to your mind? Because we saw in the video, the house is burning and you are recording that. And it's kind of like you are the reporter of your own disgrace. I felt super bad at that time, right? So what was happening? How that happened? First, how the incident happened, and second, what happened inside your head after you recorded the video?
So this was, I guess this would have been probably the beginning of 2014. So I was coming up on making videos for like 5 years at this point, right? So it was something that I was, fully in on. This is, that was my first apartment. I was living there by myself. I was really making content, starting to, get sponsors. Like at that point in my life, things were looking really good, right? I was having a lot of fun. And so it was really something stupid, right? I lived in an apartment building and I was asleep. I remember I stayed up late the night before finishing up a video, and because I slept in because I knew I wanted to get that video done that night, and I was asleep and I heard people screaming, and I open up my eyes, I look out the window and I see black smoke. So I jump up, right?
Just
it was
out
really
of your window.
Out of the window, yeah. I looked out my bedroom window and you see the black smoke, right? So I was on the third floor of, it was a 3-floor apartment complex, and I was on the third floor of it. And so I saw the black smoke, and it was really fortunate because I actually had a fire scare 2 months before that, or a month or 2 months before that. Someone had actually had I think they like had a cooking fire or something, but it was a similar situation. It was at night, but I had that moment where I thought everything was on fire. So I scrambled to grab a couple things and run outside. Thankfully, it was okay at that point. But after that, it made me think, okay, if there's a real fire, what do I do? So I was lucky enough to actually go out and I bought a little one of those fireproof safes, and I put my important documents in it and that kind of stuff. And
very lucky of you, man, and very thoughtful lucky of you. Yeah.
Yeah. It was one of those things where I just was like, when that first one happened, I was like, oh God, what happens? I don't know. So I had that. So essentially, when I sort of jumped up out of bed, looked over, I saw that there was really, really heavy black smoke. I immediately I grabbed that safe, which was fairly heavy, but I was able to put it under one arm, grab my keys, I forgot my wallet, and then I grabbed one laptop, right? That was it. I had my phone, keys, laptop, and the safe, run downstairs. And as soon as I ran down, the fire was huge, right? It was, it was all the way through the first floor. It was getting up to the second floor. My apartment wasn't on fire yet, but it was clear. So I pulled my phone out, right? Because I don't know, it was just one of those things where I just captured that moment, just like, there's nothing I can do. There's no fire extinguisher. There's no hose. This thing is, it's over, right? So, yeah, it was just one of those things where there was a while of trying to make sure other people in the building were getting out, and it was, frantic. I was helping my neighbor push a car out of their garage so it didn't burn up, and just making sure everyone was okay. And then the fire department got there. But by the time the fire department was there, my apartment didn't exist anymore. It was already collapsed, right? So it was one of those things where it was just this crazy, just nonstop kind of thing. And I'll tell you, so the video I made, that was the day after, right? So after, I was there the whole day, the fire department there, I had to fill out paperwork. It was this whole thing. And at that point, I actually didn't have my wallet. So I remember I had to actually go down to the bank and convince them without any ID or anything that I was who I said I was. I needed money. I literally had no cash. I had nothing, right? So I had to go, I convinced them to give me $50 or something. I don't remember what it was. It wasn't a lot. I went to Best Buy. I bought a charger for my phone and my laptop, which was, I needed to be able to charge that night. And the next day I went back over, and basically the whole apartment had been leveled, right? So because it was such a big fire, they had pretty much bulldozed the whole thing, because there were little bits of fire on the inside. So they had to kind of churn through. So what was my apartment was just a giant pile. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to shoot this video, right? I mean, I'm a YouTuber. I got to explain to people, what's going on.
You're going to have a huge lack of productivity. Nothing's going to be on the channel. You have to tell them somehow what is happening, right? So that's what came to your mind at that time. You have to tell your audience, hey guys, we're going to miss some videos here. And that's the reason why. It's not my fault.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was one of those things where I shot the video kind of walking around looking for stuff. And it wasn't until that night, so I went back, I cut up the video, I uploaded it. And it wasn't until I had hit the upload button that I think it all really sunk in. Because at that point I was got to do this, got to do that. I got to make sure I can go call insurance and this and that. It was all these things. But that was the first moment, that full, day later, that the video was up, and I just kind of sat down. I was like, whoa, that just happened. It was really
then you
this bizarre thing.
You realize how dangerous?
Yeah, well, it wasn't even just that. It was just I think the idea that from the second that it happened, my brain was almost in okay, I want to make a video, I want to talk about this. That was kind of where my head was, and it kind of distracted me from everything else, right? So I didn't, until that video was up, I didn't really sit there and go, okay, what do I do now? What's my plan or anything like that? I just was so focused on trying to get everything taken care of, shoot the video. Just that was what absorbed me, because I think my mind didn't want to comprehend what had gone on. I didn't want to like really absorb it.
Without
So,
money,
yeah.
without wallet, without documents, without anything, where did you sleep the first night?
Thankfully, my parents were able to come. So I was able to go back over to my parents' house, which was nice. The good thing was I did have a couple of things in that safe that I was able to eventually go and get like my ID and stuff. But yeah, it was a crazy day. It was a really crazy day.
We saw by the video that I can tell you, like, the images are crazy. You know, I think a lot of people put themselves in your shoes at that moment, right? Like many other YouTubers that later make a lot of shout outs to you to help you out, right?
Yes. And that was one of the things, like, I look at kind of like the arc of the channel. Everything was before or after fire, right? Before the fire, it was just me. I was just making videos. But after that, people like Jonathan Morrison and Lou from Unbox Therapy and Linus and Marquez and all these people chipped in and now they helped to sort of get me back on my feet with a new computer and everything. But it wasn't even just about the gear, although of course it was really appreciated. But like the thing that really kind of kicked things off was that was the first time we all came together, right? Like before we would all hang out at, you know, CES or something. We were friends, but we weren't really like close. We didn't do a lot of videos together or anything like that. But that changed after the fire, because at that point, that was the first big collab that everyone else did to sort of surprise me. And when we did that, it was one of those things where we started realizing, oh, wait, let's go do this video. Hey, why don't we do this? And by the end of that year, right, so less than a year later, we had all done, I don't know, probably like 10, 12 of these huge collabs. We're doing these like ridiculous videos with like Joe Rogan and all this just like craziness, right? And I look back on that year, right, as much as the fire was terrible, that was one of the best years of my life because so many amazing things happened. I grew so close with my new friends, essentially. We got to do all these crazy things. It was one of those things where the fire almost felt like it was just like a reset button. And my life
I gotta do a joke. I'm gonna do a joke now. You're gonna hate me for that. Do you feel like a phenix after that incident?
You know what, man? I do. Like, it was one of those things where I had a better outlook because obviously I was incredibly fortunate to have been able to woken up and gotten out, and I was 100% healthy and fine. And you know, I mean, it wasn't that long after before it was just a memory, right? It was just like, oh man, I wish I had that or this or whatever, but it was fine. Like, you can get more stuff, you can get all that stuff, but having gone through that and having sort of gained those friendships and really gained so much, it also was helpful for the channel, right? A lot of people had never even heard of me before, watched that video and subscribed, and that helped to grow the channel with that, and then obviously doing all these collaborations. So ultimately, it was a good thing. It sounds weird to say that, but like, I look back on that and I think I'm in a better position now, having gone through that, and both sort of myself and mentally, but also just with the channel, than if it had never happened, which is a crazy thing. But it's like, you got to look for the bright side. You got to look for the positives in life. And that was one of those things that really was a very big eye opener for me. And it's crazy to think it's been so many years.
It's crazy to ask that, but do you feel thankful for that incident?
I'm kind of, yeah. Who knows where I would be? Yeah. Who knows where I would be without it? I may never have done all those videos and become such close friends with everyone. I may have never have learned all the things I did on creating different kinds of videos. And I might have just done my thing for a while, got tired of it, moved on. I don't know, right? You never know. But I'm happy with how many great things came from that. And it's hard to just, you can never go back in time, right? You can never back to the future and be like, oh, well, if only I changed this or that. Because like everything that you go through in life leads you to the point where you're at, right? So yeah, it's no regrets. You gotta look forward.
Looking today, you have a podcast, you have another channel called This Is, right?
Yes.
You have many of other projects you are doing at the same time, which is crazy. But your channel, your main channel, the source of everything starts, right? I believe still the most important thing you have, the most important asset you have.
Yes.
Your channel today, how do you envision the next year, the next 2 years? How do you think about the future of a channel today? How do you plan that?
So nowadays it's very different than the early
Definitely,
days, right?
I know. I'm doing a big jump, but I believe it makes sense, right?
Yeah. It's one of those things where in the early days, I made the videos that I wanted to make, the videos that I thought might get some search, but it was very rudimentary, right? I just would make the stuff that I liked and post it, and that was that. Nowadays, though, so much of it is dictated by the algorithm, what performs well on YouTube, that it's almost like a reverse engineering thing, right? We make videos that we think will do well, and the video is sort of constructed around that. Whether it's a great idea, whether it's an amazing title or thumbnail or whatever the case is, we're sort of reverse engineering the videos and creating stuff that we think the audience will enjoy. And as part of that, we've kind of changed up the style of the videos, right? Which is not a big surprise. I mean, the channel has never been the same for more than a couple years in a row. It was always kind of, oh, we're going to start doing this and start doing that and all that kind of thing. But it was really only in the last couple of years that we've really focused more on not being just a tech channel, right? We don't just do reviews and unboxings and stuff. We do some of that. We do some explainers, but what we really try to do is to bring entertainment to the tech space, right? That's the big focus. It's about using technology to tell a cool story, to do a weird challenge, to build something. Like, I think a lot about like shows like the HGTV or like these like home improvement shows, right? I'm never going to go and build my house or do this huge renovation myself. Like, that's just not something I know how to do. Or how to build, you know, some crazy car thing, right? I mean, I like working on cars, but I would never, you know, swap the engine or something. That's way outside of my skill set. But I enjoy watching that. And what I would love to do for YouTube and for the tech space is to bring that there, right? I'm sure there's a lot of people who never built a computer that, you know, they don't necessarily want a 3-hour tutorial on how to do it. If you watch a couple guys try to build PCs in an entertaining way as like a challenge or as a head-to-head, that's something that's interesting, right? Or going on Wish and trying to buy the weirdest tech and see what it's all about. That's, I think, what's sort of really been the main focus for now, and I think going into the future, at least for the foreseeable future. I mean, this stuff always changes, but it's about not just being a tech channel, but bringing that sort of entertainment aspect to a wider audience who might be interested in tech, but maybe aren't the people who are actually, you know, in the trenches every day trying to buy graphics cards or whatever, but just find that it's an interesting sort of space.
That's for sure. You know, like any channel, it's a living creature, and it's evolving along the time. And it's changing its form, and it's changing its taste. It's changing in several ways. Like you mentioned something now that's quite interesting, like, hey, look, I want to be more entertaining kind of content than technical kind of content, but inside the tech. I got your point.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
How do you know that's the right timing? Because if you're doing the wrong timing, a lot of people that love tech will start to think, this guy looks like a clown. Then,
oh, absolutely.
Then, the other hand, if you don't put a good amount of entertainment, the people who like entertainment will say, not so funny, not so cool.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that's a gray line, quite hard to figure out where you are now. So how do you manage that?
You are dead on, man. So that's one of the big things that we juggle, right? And it's something that we've not hit the right balance on, right? It was something that we're always like, sometimes we'll step too far on one side, on the other side. The way I look at it is this: I want to create content that anyone can watch and enjoy, right? If I am always making very, very technical stuff, there's absolutely a market for that. I can make those videos forever, right? But the thing is, there are a lot of other people who do very good, very technical content. And there's a much more narrow audience of people who want to see the 30-minute review of a graphics card and the benchmarks and everything like that. Nothing against that person. I used to make those videos. But to me, I look at it as no one really does the entertainment and the tech side together, right? No one, I don't want to say that. Some people do some entertaining stuff, but no one, I think, quite does what we try to do. It's one of those things where everyone in the tech space who's been around for years, everyone's kind of found their niche, right? Everyone found, you know, either you're doing the gadget reviews, you're doing the very technical stuff, you're doing maybe the lighter stuff for people who are interested in the thing but don't need the huge sort of in-depth technical analysis. But for me, it's one of those things where, having done pretty much all of that at one point or another, the entertainment stuff feels like it's got the most sort of potential. And ultimately, it's the stuff that's performed best for us, right? So it's easy to sit here and say, oh, we have this, you know, this plan and we have everything figured out. but everything we ever do is based on something performing well, right? That's the way every single shift in the channel has ever happened, is that, oh, I made this video, it did really well, I'm gonna make more of those. Oh, this video that I used to make that did well doesn't do any well, right? It's sort of more of an organic process, but as we've seen sort of making more of these entertainment style videos, they do really well. People enjoy them, people subscribe, people stick around to the channel and watch more, which is just a very natural incentive to make stuff that personally I like making those videos more than the standard reviews anyway. So it's one of those things where, like you said, it's a living, breathing thing. Whether this balance is the same 6 months from now or 6 years from now, it won't be, right? We'll
really
have moved in one way or another. Yeah, but that's what it gets me excited. And I think that's what has the most potential, is trying to reach more of that wider audience who's interested in tech, but might not necessarily know the difference between an RTX 3070 and a 3080.
Yeah, but you know what? Like, when you start to bring more entertainment, and then in your mind start to think about that, like how to create an entertainment content, which is a different kind of work, a different pattern of work, a different pattern of thinking on how to do it. You start to widen your horizon and you start to broaden your audience, right? So you know you're gonna get there. You don't know how long, but you know you're gonna get there. I understand that's the feeling you got right now, right? You want to reach more people. Then the natural question when YouTubers and content creators have, when they reach this kind of intersection, should I be more technical? Should I be more not technical, entertainer, or easygoing on the content, right? For better understanding of the audience. They make the same question. Should I make another channel? Or should I change everything on this channel that I have?
Yeah.
Have you been through that kind of thought?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The answer has changed, right? I think at certain points in YouTube, a second channel made a lot of sense. And then at certain points, it didn't make sense. Now I think it's swung back around to another channel does make sense. And I think a lot of that is because of the way that the algorithm is designed, right? Where it's actually fairly simple on the surface, right? YouTube looks at how many people click on your video, and they look at how long those people watch, right? It's not super, super complex. There's other things that are going on below the surface, but it kind of boils down to that. If I make a video, say a mystery tech video, right? If I make a video, someone watches that, they like it, they subscribe, then the next video they see is something different. It's a laptop review or a graphics card review or something that's more technical. They're gonna click on that, or they might not click on it. But if they don't like it and they don't watch it, YouTube goes, oh, okay, gotcha, you don't like this, I will show you something else next time, right? It's really as simple as that. So if you think about it as sort of being laned off in the content, the algorithm is smart to a degree, and some people only get served mystery tech videos that like mystery tech, and they don't see the normal stuff, right? But that's less common because YouTube looks at it as, generally speaking, a little bit more broad. And so if you're making very different kinds of content on the same channel, there's going to be a big penalty, because every time you get a little bit of momentum, you get some people who watch 1 or 2 videos in a row, that third video being different, maybe they're not interested, they won't watch it, or they'll watch it for a minute and they'll bail or whatever, and YouTube goes, oh, that's not the right move. So I think a second channel for an established creator, right? If you're a new creator, I don't think you should make a second channel. I think you need to have a fairly large scale, because at a certain point, it just makes sense. If something is working, something's not, just make the thing that's working, leave it. But if you're a more established creator and you have something that's working well, but you want to try something else, I think it makes sense to create a second channel if you feel really strongly about it. And that's pretty much what we've done with This Is, right? Which has been one of those things that, like the main channel, has certainly evolved over the last couple of years that we've been making it. But it's one of those things where there are different types of videos that go on those channels. And there's a real reason for that, which is I don't want to, on either side, impact the performance and impact the way that the algorithm looks at those videos.
So let's say your first channel is your playground. Play around, though, until you figure out what kind of play you like most. Then you build a castle over there, right? Yeah. Then you can think about a different kind of towers in other places, right?
Yeah, absolutely, right? It's like one of those things where it's always evolving and there's always different things. And the thing is, like, so I've been doing this pretty much every day for like 12 years now, right? And part of it is just, I don't want to make the same boring videos, right? If I make the same thing for more than a couple years, I'm tired. I don't want to do that anymore, right? I mean, there's certain series that I like doing for longer than others, but like, you've got to not only sort of keep the audience happy, but you have to keep yourself happy, right? I mean, sure, if you completely lock it down, I mean, I'm sure the person who presents the news every night on TV, that's what they do. That's like just their job, right? They just do that all the time. And there might be a point in which a YouTuber hits that point where they make the same videos for 20 or 30 years. That's possible. But I think it's going to be a much rarer thing on YouTube. I think you constantly have to try to innovate and change the way you're thinking, not only to try to track down whatever trend is working or whatever the algorithm wants, but also just to keep yourself sane, right? I don't think a lot of us are like, we spend our whole lives waiting to make graphics card reviews or something, right? Like, that's not most people. It's more about like what keeps you entertained and what then therefore entertains other people.
Got it. Well, we're running out of time and I have to open for questions. So let me tell in Portuguese for the audience that we're gonna open for questions very soon. Ok, pessoal? A gente vai abrir para perguntas daqui a pouquinho. Vocês podem fazer a pergunta em português, lembrando sempre da prioridade para Superchat. Tá? Eu não vou poder ir pro roxinho hoje. Vou ficar aqui no Superchat, tá bom? E a gente se concentra aqui no Superchat do YouTube. Prioridade, Superchat, perguntas pro Austin, não pro Marcel. Austin, não Marcel, ok? Então isso é importante para vocês. Vocês podem fazer a pergunta em português, eu traduzo ela pro inglês pro cara não ter o menor problema, ok? Okay, guys, very soon we're gonna open for the questions, that's what I say in Portuguese. Questions to Austin, not to Marcel, because sometimes they send questions to me. It's like, there's no point of that. There is a guest here. We should respect the guest. So, before we start the questions, my last question, the questions from the audience, but my last question that I do for every single content creator that comes to the show is always the same question. For someone, Austin, that is starting content creation now, or is about to start, it's thinking about. Someone that wants to open a YouTube channel or a podcast or no matter what, a blog, whatever, they just want to start. What is the most important advice you can give to them? You have to summarize that, okay? What is the most important advice? And second, what is the worst sin they can do?
Oh, I like that. I like the follow-up there. Most important advice, start making content and start making mistakes, right? No one is going to just get anywhere if you're constantly thinking about it and thinking about it. You have to start making stuff. And keep in mind, that stuff you make is not going to do well. You're going to regret it. You're going to be like, oh, I should have done this, done that, whatever. Every time you make a piece of content, just try to learn something from it, right? Learn, oh, did this do well? Okay, why did it do well? Did I have fun making this? Okay, why did I have fun making this? Or, and always the more entertaining thing, or always the thing that is better for you to learn are the failures. Why did this video not do well? Why did I not like this? Why did this do poorly or this or that? All of those things are important because every video you make, you're going to help sort of improve your on-camera personality. You're going to learn the little tricks like how to have better eye contact with the camera or how to improve your audio quality, whatever the case is. But constantly be improving because over time, you'll figure it out, right? If it's right for you and you keep making content, things will work, you'll make more of those things and you will grow from there. But if you're just thinking about it or if you're make a couple videos, then you take a few months off or whatever, you're not going to go anywhere, right? You need to be consistent and constantly creating stuff, even if you're not always posting. You need to be constantly creating stuff. And every time you make something, either learn the positives or the negatives from that and move that and apply that to the next thing.
And what about the worst sin a content creator can do, my friend? That one should be a very, very personal thing.
I mean, there are a lot of things you can do. I think some of the obvious ones would be like getting kicked off the platform. But I think it's not creating, right? I think some people can get away with making a video every 3 or 4 months, right? But that is a very rare creator, and that's someone who's built up something over the years. Be creating, right? You don't have to create a video every day. You don't even have to create a video every week necessarily, but you should be creating on a regular basis. You should be thinking about it, right? Because I think something that a lot of creators don't do.
It's not about publishing, it's about creating.
Yes.
Right.
You don't have to publish
that's the
everything.
difference, right?
Absolutely. We make a lot of videos that never see the light of day, right? That happens not as much as it used to, but it still happens on a pretty regular basis, right? But I think it's like, you're never going to learn if you're not creating stuff. And by posting it, like, especially in the early days, there's not a lot of downside to posting something. As long as it's not, you feel horrible about it, it's not going to hurt really, right? Because you're still figuring things out. But I think as long as you're creating and as long as you're thinking, I think something that a lot of creators, even bigger creators, don't do, I think, as much as they should, is think about ideas and concepts and video stuff, right? Mr. Beast, who is obviously one of the greatest YouTubers ever, right? I mean, absolutely is top of the class, and I mean, just an incredibly smart dude. He said a thing that I think has really stuck with me, which is like, you should just spend an hour a day thinking about videos, just every day, no matter what. Spend an hour a day thinking about ideas, thinking about topics, thumbnails, whatever the case is, but just think about fresh stuff. Build up that sort of backlog of like things, okay, I want to do this, I want to do that. And then over the years, you'll be able to make more and more of those things, right? That's something that I very much tried to internalize. Even all these years later, I want to spend less time creating stuff necessarily and more time thinking about the things that I am going to create, because it's easy to just blindly just make stuff, right? But when you put more of that thought into it, it always will enable you to create better stuff.
Very nice, my friend. Let's go for the chat. Let's check the questions of the audience here. And we have the first super chat of the night from Eddie Player One. Eddie Player One. Eddie is a friend of mine. Actually, he lives in Canada. He's Brazilian.
Oh, nice.
And he has a channel in English for cloud games only.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
He's a huge fan of Stadia, to be honest.
Nice. We actually just used Stadia on the Xbox today through the new Edge browser. So yeah, that's very cool.
You made that? That's the kind of thing that is super cool to do it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Ed Player One, thanks for the super chat, my friend. And he say, for a small creator, should it go the route of creating a new channel for a similar niche, from gaming to tech, or starting from scratch? Algorithm?
I think it very much makes sense if you're a small creator. I don't want to say like how many subscribers small is. I mean, if you're in those early stages, if you have a channel which you're still having a lot of like flexibility on, like,
the size is subjective, right? Depends on the niche you are. Some niches 1 million is the top. Some niches 5 million is the top. Some niches 20 million is the top.
Exactly. Yeah. So like, I don't like to say like a small channel is like 5 subscribers or 5,000, whatever the case is. But like, if you're a smaller channel, if you're still sort of learning and kind of growing, I think it's important to stay on one channel, because the algorithm effect that I was kind of talking about earlier, as far as like sort of bifurcating your audience, that's a thing that happens much more so on the larger channels, right? When you're in the tens and hundreds of thousands of views, that's where that sort of snowball and that effect has a little bit of a more pronounced effect. Because a smaller channel, you're going to get views from your audience, right? Like the people who regularly watch your channel. But generally speaking, most new channels and most smaller channels get a lot more views from brand new audience. And brand new audience who's not a regular viewer of your channel, it doesn't matter, right? Because that's the first time they've seen your video, or that's the first time they've seen it in the last month or whatever. So I would say small channels, stick with one channel and create your different kinds of content, and then decide what you want to do more or less of. And once it gets bigger, that's when you start thinking about a second channel. But anyone who is not pretty well established and doing very well, and you're not seeing those like big dips, like the point which you'll really notice is when you're creating content and some videos do 2 or 3 times the views of others, right? That's the point where we go, oh, you know what? Either if I want to keep making both these things, which you might not need to, but if you want to keep making both those things, that's the point where you should start doing it.
Got it. Marcelo do Chinês, he's a moderator here in my channel, and he just sent like a very nice sticker to support the channel. Thank you very much, Marcelo.
Oh, nice.
Majestad Gamer, he sent a super chat. Thank you very much for the super chat. And he say, Austin, what do you think about Android fragmentation? Say hello to Infinite Loop. Infinite Loop, do you remember Will from Brazil?
Yeah.
William, do you remember?
Yeah.
So it's a very popular channel here. There's a lot of fans on Loop Infinite, which should be Infinite Loop from Apple's address, right? The first Apple address. Of course. So a lot of people say hello to Loop
what
Infinite.
Is up?
Say hello to Will.
Yeah. What's up, Will? So, Android fragmentation. I mean, that was like such a thing. Like, I used to do so many videos on that back in those early days of Android, where it was totally crazy. I mean, it's certainly gotten better, I would say, over the years. I mean, you still see some companies such as Huawei who, doesn't have access to the Google Play services, and that obviously is like a pretty major problem for pretty much everywhere in the world outside of mainland China. But outside of that, I think it's in a pretty good space right now. Certainly some companies are much slower to support updates than they should be. I think about companies like Samsung, for example, who, even though they do a good job of fairly good long-term support, don't necessarily update their phones within 6 months or 9 months or whatever. Like, sometimes it gets a little stretched out, but I would say generally speaking, it's pretty good. I think most companies are on top of security updates, which is obviously the most important thing, and also just supporting the phones for longer, because there was a while there where a lot of OEMs would support their phones for like a year maybe, and those updates would come 6 months or a year after the original Android went live, right? Which is obviously a huge problem regardless of whether you're buying a budget phone or an expensive phone, right? But I think most companies have gotten at least to be passable on that side. And the specific like fragmentation of the devices it's a little trickier because there are a lot of form factors, right? I mean, if you look at if you're an Android manufacturer or an Android app maker, really more so, you have to support so many different sizes of screens, refresh rates, folding phones, dual screen phones, Chromebooks. I mean, it is a mind-boggling amount of devices. But I will say, to Google's credit, I think they do a fairly good job of making Android pretty universal, right? Where it's not like you have to code like on an iPhone, where you have to code the exact resolution of every single screen. Like there's a little bit more flexibility there, which is obviously more similar to something like a Windows or a Mac app, right? Which is meant to be open and closed in, you know, any size window you want. So I would say my very long answer being condensed a little bit. I feel good. It's certainly better than it used to be. But I think just with the nature of Android, it's never going to be perfect. There's always going to be updates that are, you know, different on devices. And there's certainly going to be a lot more new form factors, which are going to be kind of a bit of the Wild West over the next few years.
You know, this kind of question came because I have a say here after a lot of thought about it. You know, I'm from the industry and these kind of things impact me all the time. And because I'm here internet, people also do a lot of jokes and play around. And a lot of people use the word fragmentation together with Android as correlated bad feature of the operational system. So it's when it's said, it's not said in a way that this is something natural of the system. No, it's said as this is something bad about this system. But the point is, I play around about that, make jokes about that. I say there is no Android fragmentation because there is no fragmentation. And then people say, yes, there's fragmentation, different versions. So if that's true, there's fragmentation for everyone. There's iOS fragmentation. There is Windows fragmentation because all of them have different versions and different machines.
Absolutely.
So, so that's why I say there's no Android fragmentation. There is fragmentation, but if you think there is Android fragmentation, so also there is iOS fragmentation, also there is Windows fragmentation, so on and so forth. So that's my point on that. Android is evolving quite fast. And we see along the time how it's changing. And we see in the past 2 years, 3 years, how it's becoming solid. Not changing that much, but all the incremental changes are good changes and make it stable and make it more easy to use. And that's something that we see today on Windows. But there's one fundamental thing we have to understand is that Microsoft with Windows and Satya Nadella, they reach a such moment in the company's life that Windows is still quite important, but they don't need to release every year a new operational system. They can make this one the best operational system. So you see, we're still on Windows 10 from 2010, and they are just doing small incremental upgrades, making it better, better, and better. So the same thing is Android, but because somehow Google creates in this way that each flavor is completely different, and they let the manufacturers, the hardware manufacturers, that most of them don't have all the knowledge on software, to do a lot of heavy lift on the software. So this creates some delay. And because of that, some people attribute somehow to the word Android fragmentation this situation, which is nothing to do with the word or what that means.
Yeah. And I think it's also a holdover of a different time where there used to be, like you were saying, massive Android updates every year. Like there would be like these huge shifts in performance and look, and it would be wildly different. And I think people would go in and buy a phone and they would see two phones that might have a year or 6 months different version of Android, but would look wildly different. And obviously like the skins and some of the stuff. So I think it's certainly, when you compare where we are now to 2011, 2012, 2013, very different.
Huge. But it's the same like compare Windows 95.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? Oh my God, Windows 2000.
Vista, man.
No,
I'll
tell you something you won't believe. I'm one of the few persons in this world who I was working at Asus at that time, and I was at Microsoft, in a Microsoft meeting, and then Steve Ballmer coming in the room. It was like a meeting between Asus, Microsoft, and then suddenly, I think it was the clerk or someone from Microsoft, he started to give to us a lot of Vista copies with the autograph of Steve Ballmer. I still have one of those. So that's the worst combination ever. It's the worst gift ever.
Yo, I'll take that off your hands if you don't want it anymore. I like Vista, man. What kind of meeting? You're like, wait, so Steve Ballmer's in the room as they're handing you out Vista copies with his
like
signature
someone
on
else from Microsoft is giving like the Vista copies for everyone as a kind of gift, you know? because the CEO of Microsoft is on the room, and then all the Vista has an autograph from Steve Ballmer, like a special gift. I look at that and I said, okay, this guy has a history on tech, but I feel like shit now.
I'm just saying again, if you ever want to get rid of it, hit your boy up. I'll take off your hands.
Okay. Fernando Mistura send a super chat. Thanks a lot, Fernando. He didn't say anything, but when they do that, pretty much they are supporting, and I thank very much then for that. Luis Jacaranda send a super chat here. He says, it's very beautiful to see your channel, Austin, because of the excellent takes you have. And he watched your channel, even from Brazil, even not speaking English,
awesome.
using the subtitles from YouTube.
Oh, that is
Look,
awesome.
how cool is that? Yeah. And he says that he looks a lot on the way you also picture and frame your videos. That is a huge inspiration for him.
That is amazing. Yeah, I mean, I certainly can't take credit for all of that. I used to make all the videos by myself, but for the last 5 years or so, I've had a team which has gotten bigger and bigger, and I will give a lot of credit to them for a lot of the amazing camera work and stuff, and a lot of the sets that they've been able to build. But yeah, that's incredible. That's one of the things I wish I could do more.
Last time when we met, you take to Taiwan. What's the name of the guy? Super nice guy.
Ken.
He was super nice. Do you remember we went to that city by the shore?
Oh yeah. Whatever the rocks were with the base.
Yeah, and it was quite amazing, that trip. And then this guy was super nice
Yes.
the whole trip. And enjoy a lot. I remember he's enjoying a lot.
Yeah. Ken has absolutely been there for a long time, and it's just it's great.
Rodrigo Chip Sandenberg he sent, oops, Portuguese came out. He sent like a super chat here. Thanks a lot, Rodrigo. He's a gamer developer in Brazil. This guy is really, really nice. And he said, you mentioned a test of Stadia on Xbox. How do you see Stadia so far? Is there any game that caught your eye? And what about mobile games?
So the test we did was very brief, to be fair. I literally just made sure it works, but there's a new version of Edge that is coming out for the Series X and the Series S, which is the full version of Edge, right? You can use Discord on it, you use Skype on it, you can use Stadia on it. Stadia is interesting. Like, obviously, I would say Stadia has not had the smoothest rollout since launch. I think that there's been a lot of talk, obviously, with them sort of pulling the plug on a lot of their their in-house development team and whatnot. It's interesting. I feel like cloud gaming right now very much reminds me of where VR was back in 2014, 2015. Like, there was this initial boom. Everyone got very excited about it, but the tech wasn't quite there, and a lot of that kind of cooled off. And now, as you see stuff like with Oculus, a lot of the stuff's starting to come back, and people are kind of realizing now that there's been a few more years to mature. I feel like in some ways, things like Stadia are kind of along that same line, where it feels like it was a little bit too ambitious for what it was at day one. There's certainly a lot of very cool stuff that they've done, and I'm not sitting here saying that Stadia, I'm writing it off or anything, but I think the way that they structured the price of not only having to pay for games, but also for a subscription was a little bit muddy. Where you played it on Chromecast, all the features that they talked about weren't there. Like, it to me feels like one of the things that wasn't quite fully baked from day one. Certainly over the last, year or so, we've seen some of that. So to me, I feel like Stadia has a lot of really cool potential, but I also look at what other companies are doing, like, of course, like Amazon with Luna, and even really, it's hard to not talk about this stuff without talking about what Microsoft are doing with Game Pass, right? Because that to me feels like the real final form of this, right? Where you're getting access to not only the games that you can download to your console or to your PC, but you're also able to stream a lot of other games, right? This morning, they were just talking about how you can now play a lot of Xbox 360 games via Game Pass on your phone and whatnot. To me, that being included in a subscription instead of having to purchase the games individually, which are locked to a platform like Stadia or even Luna's a little bit different, I know. That to me feels like where the times have shifted maybe a little bit. So we'll see. But it's definitely, things have changed a lot over the last couple of years when it comes to streaming games.
Just to complement his question, because I have a lot of discussions with Rodrigo. Like if cloud gaming, how far it goes. Cloud gaming is the future. Why people are not going to cloud gaming as crazy if it is the future? And in the other hand, I say, hey, this is a matter of time. People is very used to have a box at home to play games. Maybe the good, in my mind, Marcel's idea, maybe the good approach for some markets like US would be to make a, instead of a Chromecast, make a box, call it Stadia, sell with the controller on Best Buy and say, this is your Google console for games. Definitely they would reach much more people just because the culture of video gaming and consoles itself, in the end, the service will be the same, you know, but the way you present to the end user will be totally different. But
yeah,
but the thing is, I see cloud gaming on countries like US, well-developed countries like US, Canada, North America, or Europe, let's say like this, not so compelling as it can be on development countries where the consoles are too expensive.
Yeah.
They spend a it's super hard. It becomes like a dream to have a kind of PlayStation 5 or Xbox X Series. It's something almost impossible for them. But cloud gaming can bring games, AAA games they never would have the chance to play to these people because it makes so cheap. Do you think in the same way? Do you have similar kind of thinking about that? What do you think?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the issues that people have had with cloud gaming is always the connection, the lag, all this kind of stuff. But you think about things like 5G, which does have a lot of potential to give you not only the bandwidth, but importantly, that sort of low sort of latency and the low ping. You're very much correct, right? And that's something that you look at so much of the world. I mean, it's hard to sort of understate how dominant the smartphone is versus the PC and consoles and so many other places, right? I think it's really easy, especially as someone who lives in North America, right? Most people game on their computers or on their game consoles or whatever, but so much of the world kind of skipped over that, right? For the exact reasons that you were just discussing, right? And so much of it is based on the phone that it really does feel like a natural extension of cloud gaming to be able to, as the internet supports it, which is a big question mark in a lot of places, even in the greatest 5G sort of areas in the world, you can still have pockets, and as you're playing a game, you get a little bit of lag. That could be a huge problem. But I think that does make a lot more sense. But I would say that there's a lot of potential for cloud gaming anywhere, right? I mean, there's a lot of like, who wants to go out and spend all this money, even here where it's a little bit less expensive, on a PS5 or whatever, when you can just plug something into your TV and, you know, just play. But I think we're still a little ways away.
The TV can come with the service.
Exactly.
As long as that has a powerful processor to manage that, you know.
Yeah. So I think it's one of those things where it might have a little bit of a lull for a couple of years, but I think as the technology gets better, as the internet around it and the infrastructure gets better, I think we're going to see it just sort of naturally start sort of growing because it's one of the best situations for people. But I think right now, people have tried it. They're like, this is okay, but I already have my PC or whatever the case is. I'm not that interested. I'm not going to go buy more games. So I think 5 years from now, we'll be having a different conversation about it.
Great. Last question. People, please don't send more super chats. This will be the last question before we finish. Like, Austin is very busy and he's fully booked. He's making a big favor to be here and spend this time with us, but we are running out of time completely. Eduardo Medeiros, he sent a super chat. Thanks a lot, Eduardo. He said, what do you think it will happen with the technology used in PCs in short term? Example, merging RAM with internal storage. This is something I used to say here. That's the future. And the use of advanced coolers. So just to put it in context, the current speed of SSD, it's becoming insane. If you're talking about the M2 and VME, this kind of stuff. And if you look to the RAM memory, is not growing the same pace. Actually, the storage is reaching very close year by year to the same speeds as RAM. The problem is, no matter if it's RISC or CISC technology you are using, which is the architecture you are using, they are based to work with RAM in the middle. They are not created to work without the RAM. But very soon we may see some kind of new architecture that don't need RAM, just because storage, it's becoming super fast and not so expensive like it was before, when you have a hard drive for huge volume and you have RAM just to make things a little bit faster, right?
Yeah.
So that's one point. And what do you think about it?
I think it's really interesting because I think you really kind of hit it there. I think a lot about how we used to see, and I'll go bring the consoles up as a sort of good example here, right? It used to be every console generation, every 5 to 7 years or so, you would see a huge jump in performance, right? You would see the CPU is 10 times better. You would see there's 8 times more RAM. You would see the graphics are 20 times better. Like you would see these huge things, right? But if you look over the last 7, 8 years, right? That was what we saw going from, say, PS3 to PS4, right? It went from half a gig of RAM to 8 gigs of RAM. But guess what? 7, 8 years later, we've only doubled that, right? I think you can see that other elements like the CPU is actually 4 or 5 times faster. You see the GPU is, well, depends on if you're going from pro or not, but you've seen these huge leaps in so many other ways, but the memory is not massively faster, and it's certainly the capacity isn't much larger, right? I mean, I feel like back in, oh God, what was it, like 15 years ago when I started making videos, 4 gigs of RAM, yeah, that's fine. I can still go buy a brand new system with 4 gigs of RAM today, right? I cannot go out and buy a system with a single core processor or a 60 gigabyte, 4200 RPM hard drive or whatever, right? So it is interesting to think about that. I don't know how long it will take. I think that the storage space is interesting. I know that there are certainly, and I'm not technical enough to understand the really minute differences between how you're able to get the speed versus latency sort of trade-offs in different types of DRAM. Obviously, like you said, that there's these other elements like, you know, pretty much every SSD has to have that RAM cache and all the processing, and then it stores. But like, there's a lot of things there. And the way I understand it is that sort of that speed is always a sort of balance with the throughput of like having the cache on the chip, on the CPU or the GPU or whatever. And then of course you have one level higher, which is the system RAM. So I'll be curious to see how that can merge. And obviously the RAM doesn't completely.
Time, writing time, actually. So Austin, my friend, I'd like to thank you very much for coming here. I love to have this chat with you. A long time don't talk to you. It was amazing. Amazing. I don't know if you know any word in Portuguese, because some people ask, do you know some words in Portuguese? I doubt you do it. You don't know anything? Okay, but there is something, something I would like you to say. It's not, believe me, I'm not punking you, okay? So
sure, let's do it.
That's it. You always say, what do you always say in your videos? Hey guys, that's how you start everything, right?
Yep.
Hey guys, right high in the pitch, right? Okay, so if I translate that to Portuguese, should it be something like, Ei pessoal.
Ei pessoal.
E aí pessoal. E
Ei
aí
pessoal.
E aí pessoal.
That's awesome. I feel like I've had a lot of situations where I've tried to learn stuff on the fly, like, oh, like, hey, just say this word or whatever, and I feel like I can never get the pronunciation.
No,
right.
you never do it. You never do it.
Never.
You never do it. You never do it. It's the same for me. Like, come on, I'm not natural born English speaker. There's always something in my voice, and that doesn't make sense when I pronounce some words, you know, but it's just the way it is.
That's the way it is.
Austin, thank you very much, man. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for being here with me. And now you can tell people whatever you want, where to find you, beside the fact that I put all the links down here for all your channels and your podcasts, and everything is down here in the description. And also give some message to the Brazilian audience. They are eager to hear from you.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for everyone for watching. I think it's one of those things where, like you said, we haven't hung out and caught up in forever, and hopefully we can actually see each other in person again the next little while. But yeah, huge thank you to everyone who watches the content. Hearing stuff like how you guys are watching stuff with like the subtitles just blows my mind, because I know those subtitles are not amazing. I apologize for not being able to have all the videos subtitled in various different languages, but thank you so much for the support. And ultimately, thank you for allowing me to do what I do, right? I truly love creating content. It's something that like we've talked about, it's something that I've enjoyed doing for the majority of my life now. I have no plans of stopping anytime soon. So thank you for enabling me to do what I love. And then, yeah, if you haven't checked me out and somehow you made it this far, check out YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, just thank you very much for the support. I really do appreciate it.
Brazilian guys love you, man. Believe me. They are Brazilian audience love you. I hope one day, have you ever been in Brazil?
I have never been.
You've never been in Brazil. So when you go to Brazil, let me know. Even if I'm not there, there's a plenty of friends that I will make sure you got introduced to them, and they're going to show you the country like no other can do.
Ah, that would be amazing.
Are you going with your girl?
What's up?
Are you going to Brazil with your girl when the day you went? You don't know, right?
No comment.
Maybe. Okay, let me know in advance, because if you're coming with your girl, we'll be different kind of guys.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah, I'll get back to you on that one.
It's just a matter of family stuff. Thank you very much, man. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, dude.
That's it. For you who are watching in English, that's how I end this MC 101. I hope you enjoy. I'm gonna switch to Portuguese and say goodbye to my audience in Portuguese. Gente, e esse foi o MC 101 número 96 com o Austin Evans. Legal pra caramba, não foi? Caraca, eu vou colocar depois as legendas, subtitles, as legendas vão estar aqui, tá? Talvez demore alguns dias, 2, 3 dias, vai dar um trabalho fazer isso, é uma longa conversa. Eu espero que vocês tenham curtido, que vocês tenham realmente aproveitado. E quem sabe eu não trago mais alguns youtubers aí da gringa. Vocês gostaram? Diz aqui embaixo pra mim, depois do vídeo, não agora, depois, quando o vídeo estiver disponível, se vocês curtiram, tá bom? Quem tá assistindo no TODAS, ó, o Izinho aqui tá sugerindo vídeos, tá? Não esqueçam disso. E, gente, se cuidem, fiquem com Deus e até a próxima. Beijo, fui!